Hey there and welcome back to another Stranger Things 5 video, and today we're going to be desperately trying to catch up on everything I missed out on when I was sick. We've gotten through the first two episodes of Volume 1 and now it's on to Episode 3, The Turnbow Trap, which follows off from the big reveal last episode that Vecna is Mr. Whatsit, and he's taken Holly to a happy version of his childhood home where he's planning on taking numerous other children too. Before we go any further, I will say that we are going to be playing with full spoilers because honestly, Volume 1's been out for ages, and Volume 2's out now, and the show is made to be binged, you know. With all that being said though, it's time to jump into the episode and see what we can find. We start off the episode back at the wall that Hopper and Al came across in their search for Holly. Pop's trying to cut through it with a knife and Al's using her powers to try to rip it open, but no matter how hard they try, it's not budging. Is this perhaps our first hint that Vecna's going to be significantly stronger than Al when they meet up next time, and so she is indeed going to need the full support of the entire party to take him on and win? They're unable to make it through the wall, and so Hopper wants to give up and find another way, whilst Al demands that he gives her food to recharge her battery to try to keep going. This leads to a funny little scene where she's expecting sweets or chips or maybe Gatorade, and then he reveals that he only has beef jerky, which she throws back at him. It's really nice to be able to have these little doses of humour here and there, even in some of the darker storylines like this one. They're in a literal hellscape and she's complaining that he only has beef jerky in his bag. It's kind of funny. They then notice headlights in the distance and see a convoy of soldiers is speeding towards their location. I do have to wonder, how the hell do they even know they're in this location specifically? I mean, the Upside Down is a hellish replica of Hawkins, right? So that means there's a huge area to search, but they figure out their exact location this quickly and easily? Feels a little convenient, doesn't it? They then use their new weapon designed just for Al, it seems. I guess it's probably a similar concept to what the Russians were using on the Upside Down monsters to make them vulnerable to attack. So they blast Al and she's incapacitated, and I actually think this is a great plot development because it makes the soldiers seem scary and like a legitimate threat to her after she blitzed them in the desert last season. It was definitely a much needed story addition. We cut to Joyce, who's driving around Hawkins frantically looking for Robin and Will whilst trying to radio them, saying she isn't mad, which is a lie, but she just wants to know that they're safe. Unluckily for Robin and Will, she drives right past where they're cycling, reverses back angrily and orders them into the car. I will say that the part where she slams the brakes and from Will and Robin's POV you can see her speed towards them in reverse was very funny. Then she angrily winds down her window. It's just comedy gold for me. They get in the car and the scene gets more serious, with Joyce laying into Robin about putting Will in danger and all that sort of thing, and just getting really heated. What I did like though is that they didn't make Robin meekly roll over. She does sound contrite and is clearly not wanting to escalate anything, but she also clearly isn't sorry and would do it again, but would just leave a note next time. I know that she says she's not trying to be a shit stirrer here, but I actually kind of think she is, considering she repeats that line after Will stands up for himself at long last. Just sort of rubbing it in that they're not going to be listening to her bad plans anymore. Anyway, as I said, Will finally stands up for himself after 2 episodes of being smothered, and this serves as the next scene in the chain from him seeing Robin and Vicky kiss to him getting his powers at the end of episode 4. I really loved this sequence. He tells his mum how it is, that her plan sucked and that his worked, and now they know what Vecna's planning so they can try to counter him. It's such a good payoff to the first 2 episodes where there's this massive sense of frustration that he's being kept on the bench by his own mum, bubbling under the surface for both him and also us, the audience. You're meant to support him and to be slowly getting frustrated that Joyce is being so overprotective of him to the detriment of everything they're trying to do. This scene, you finally get him to stand up, and he's not being treated like he's weak, and it's extremely cathartic. Now I just need one of these scenes where Nancy tells Steve to back off for good, and Al gets Hopper to back down as well, and we are golden. Before the opening credits roll, we then get our first look at who's the next target of Vecna in the guise of Mr. Whatsit. Derek, that kid that was bullying Holly. I have to say, the Mr. Whatsit music is done so well. It's so deeply creepy and unsettling. I feel like Will sensing creatures from the Upside Down nearby whenever I hear it. It just raises the hair on the back of your neck. We then get the intro theme, and when we return, it's to see Holly in the house with Henry eating breakfast, where he tells her that her parents are improving in the hospital, and they're going to be able to join them here when they're recovered. Until then though, they want her to remain here. He tells her that Derek's coming to stay with them next, and that he's going to ensure that he'll be on his best behaviour. He takes her outside and is going to leave for the day, telling her that she has the whole run of the house, but that she shouldn't go into the woods under any circumstances because that's where the monsters live. But if she stays here, the monsters can't find her. What I liked about the scene is that it's both wholesome but also super unsettling. Even if you didn't know Henry's Vecna, you'd probably feel this way. On the surface, all of the words he speaks to her are so kind, and he gets her favourite food and toys, he's gentle and sweet, but then under the surface, his voice is kind of monotone, and I guess for me, it's almost like he's forcing the emotion into the words. That the way he's behaving here is really unnatural to him. Plus, he has some really dead eyes. It's honestly such good acting from him here to get across this monstrous, deranged man who's trying to play house and fool a little girl. It's such a wonderfully unsettling scene overall. I also found it interesting that his house and the clothes he wears are also dated by the late 80s. It's like he's permanently stuck in an era from before he was taken by Brenner and put into Hawkins' lab. or maybe he's mimicking what he remembered his father used to wear or something. Either way, this scene's awesome, and I love the little mystery that they set up with Max watching Holly from the forest, but of course, you don't know it's Max. Well, at least I didn't know. I actually think it was such a good little mystery because you know that he doesn't want her to go there, and he claims there are monsters in the woods. Plus, you know somebody's watching, but it had me completely stumped, and sometimes that's exactly what you want from the story. You want to be in the dark until the big reveal, so you can be massively excited for when you find out the truth. We then return to the Upside Down, where from just being in the presence of that weapon, Al is still completely out of it and is still in a lot of pain, with Hopper desperately trying to get her to be quiet so she doesn't reveal their location. The lead soldier goes to take a piss, and as he's doing so, he notices Hopper's knife that he left behind embedded in the wall. So the lead guy tells one of them to get back on the weapon, and they slowly start moving it around to try to locate her, and when they do, she screams. To be honest, I actually thought this worked really well. It didn't feel forced or anything like that. They hear the scream, and now they know the two of them are likely hiding behind the billboard, and so they slowly approach. This is what kicks off a fairly standard action sequence where the husky ex-military small-town cop is able to rather easily take down a squad of what I would assume are experienced soldiers or special forces. I mean, I don't think you're sending the regular rank and file to a demon world, you know? So he ambushes them and takes them pretty much all down alone and destroys the hedgehog, which allows Al to get back up and take out the leader herself. Is it very realistic? No, but it's very 80s action movie, and I'm all here for that. I also thought it was good to have that weapon involved so it would actually give Hopper something to do as opposed to later on in the story where having a gun no longer really means anything at all. From here, all of the other storylines going on outside the Upside Down, the hospital team, the van team, and the radio station team all converge back at the station. We get a few brief reunions which were good, especially the ones with Dustin, Lucas, and Mike, before we head into some storyline. The gist of this first part of the scene is that Will's figured out what the next move of Vecna is, and whilst he doesn't know what his motive is of right now, he does know that Derek Turnbow's the next target, and so they have to save him. What I loved about this scene and about the next one when they're in the basement is that we can see that Will is finally coming into his own as a character. As opposed to being a bit of a bystander or a background character, he's leading the discussions and has even come up with his own plan. I also appreciated that it was perhaps one of the most insane plans of all, as it involves breaking into a house to abduct a child while his family's asleep, whilst also blindfolding him and not telling him where he is. Absolutely unhinged, and I loved it. You can really tell that he's Joyce's son, can't you? Poor Jonathan having flashbacks to season 1 where he thought his mum was insane, thinking that Will was talking to her through the Christmas lights. Also, it was great to see the growth from Joyce in this scene where she understands that she was wrong all along, and she needs to be supportive of Will going forward and going along with his crazy scheme. Dustin ends up poking a lot of holes in the plan as he's a bit of a downer these days. I mean, he took another shot at Steve during the initial conversation when Steve didn't really understand something, and he's not hugely happy with the plan either, it seems. Luckily, Mike comes to the rescue to fill in some of these holes with his own plan, which is honestly rather insane too. It involves drugging the Turnbow family, then stealing all of them and taking them to the farm, ambushing the Demogorgon and putting the tracker on it, before following it to Vecna's lair and thus Holly's location. They plan to do all of this simply on their own with some traps. Okay. Then again, Jonathan, Nancy, and Steve did do this once with guns, a bear trap, and a baseball bat with nails in it, so I can see why they think they'd actually have a chance of taking it on. Also, I love that Mike just always carries around his little D&D characters wherever he goes. It is very endearing. To be honest, I never really cared all that much for Mike over the course of the first 4 seasons. I didn't hate him, but he just wasn't a character I was interested in as much as some of the others. This season's been such a come up from my interest in the character though. Just another instance of great character building and writing, really. Here we move on to see what Holly's been up to since the start of the episode, and we switch genres to any sort of teen coming of age story. Holly's dancing her way through every room, she's baking herself a cake and eating it whilst watching TV. She gets out a bunch of different dresses and they have a twirl transition where she tries them all on. I thought it was a nice touch that they finished on her with an inverted coloured dress of Alice in Wonderland's dress. I just think it's a fun little thing to do, seeing as she's lost in some sort of dream world, although if you ask me, I'd prefer to take my chances with the Queen of Hearts than spend time chilling in Vecna's house. These might also be incidental, but I did think the clown on top of the desk/bookshelf looked kind of like the live-action Disney Mad Hatter, and there are lots of rabbits around which kind of gave me March Hare vibes. She looks in the mirror and decides she needs some sort of neckwear to go along with her new outfit. It was at this point that I was completely sucked into the story of the scene, and I kind of forgot what I was watching. I was instead transported back to my childhood, which made it all the more jarring in a good way when you heard that doorbell ring and shit got real again. She notices a photo of Henry and his family when she's searching for something to wear, and this leads her to Henry's room to put on his Boy Scout scarf. I will say I found it interesting that Henry had a photo of his family here because it seemed like he kind of hated them, you know, given the whole brutal murder thing. Plus, whilst this is clearly his memory world, at the same time, it seems like things have been somewhat curated by him, so he could clearly get rid of things he doesn't want, couldn't he? I'm just wondering if this is hinting that there's more going on than what we've seen so far. Holly hears the doorbell ring and once again, the mystery side of things kicks in. Be honest with me, how many people figured out it was Max by this point? Because I distinctly remember not having a clue who it could be at all. I will say that Holly's braver than me to go out there and check the mail after this, and within she finds a note from Henry asking her for help and a map to his location. I mean, the fact that he didn't talk to her in person despite apparently being at the house was probably the first clue I had that it wasn't a note from Vecna, but once again, I had no idea of who the hell it could possibly be from. It was such a well-crafted mystery in that way. So often in film and TV these days I find myself sitting there and managing to predict all the big twists before they happen. I think the more you watch, the more you start to recognize signs and able to see how writers use similar character beats, moments, or plot points. Here though, they actually got me, probably because it was somewhat out of left field, although I guess there's a chance that everybody else in the world is scoffing at me for being too stupid to get it. We then check in with the Upside Down storyline where Sullivan's pissed because the squad got blitzed, and thus he's even more determined to hunt Al down. At the same time, Hop and Al took that one guy and stole one of the vehicles to take them to their trusty junkyard. Here we get a variant on the scene with Will and Joyce earlier. However, where Joyce was more open to listening to Will and accepting his choices and ability to get involved despite danger, Hopper ain't all that. It does make sense, after all, Hopper is a vastly different type of person and is extremely stubborn. Plus, whilst Will came home and thus she hasn't lost a child, Hopper still has that lingering unresolved trauma of watching his daughter Sarah die, so he's not going to just let Al go and do her thing. It makes sense, but that doesn't mean it isn't frustrating. The dude's plan is to try to get convoy information out of the soldier and then escape back to the real world to start again. Al thinks that plan sucks and they should instead be using her power to force him to tell them what the wall is, and if he and the military know a way to get through it. Thus, they have a chance of finding Vecna's lair and saving Holly at the same time, and so they compromise. It's not as cathartic as the scene with Will and Joyce, but I guess that is the point. I do think that narratively it makes sense for Hopper to eventually have full faith in her and let her do her thing, but it's probably better for the pacing for him to come to that realization a lot more slowly based on who he is. I just hope that he does eventually come to that realization, because otherwise it feels like they've made no real progress in this dynamic over the course of what, a decade? This then leads us to Erica's school, where she's in class with Mr. Clark learning about wormholes, and it's just kicking ass, really. You know what? The first two episodes have had a distinct lack of Erica, and I'm glad they're addressing the deficit. Mike and Lucas turn up to try to get her attention, and she comes out into the hallway to talk to them, and my god, her and Lucas have some of the best sibling chemistry here when she's just effortlessly able to get under his skin, and he wants to rage, but he can't because he needs her on their side. I also loved how rapid fire the back and forth dialogue is, as she tells him that she can't help them with the Turnbow house, as she and Tina are now enemies, and thus she has no intention of helping to save Derek, who she iconically refers to as dipshit Derek. In the end though, she caves when she hears about Holly, and is told that this will ensure that Tina never wants to speak to her ever again. We move over to the hospital for yet another fairly lighthearted scene where Robin and Will have to sneak past Vicky, who Robin wants to avoid because she's going to have to cancel their date again, seeing as they have this mission to save Derek Turnbow. I like that we're getting more of these rapid fire, lighthearted scenes, to be honest, because we're getting closer and closer to crunch time, where things are going to be more action-packed and whatnot. Thus, it is important to have this type of downtime to break things up so it isn't just go, go, go all the time for the audience. I also like the conversation that Will had with Robin, and how it's continuing to slowly build to what are pretty huge moments for his character. And that realization in Robin's eyes when he's asking questions of her was really well done, I thought. Just great acting all around in that scene. They steal the pills to drug the family, and on they go. At their new base at the farm, Murray again arrives with more supplies, and I do have to wonder about the competence of the military. They're really giving original trilogy stormtroopers a run for their money in terms of overall intelligence. I mean, for starters, it's only been a day or so since he made his first run into the town for supplies, right? Wouldn't the border guards be a bit suspicious that they have the same dude coming back yet again? Plus, he doesn't seem to actually have anything in the back of his truck except for weapons and other suspicious items. Did they seriously not check the back again and just let him go through? Feels a little bit contrived if you ask me, but I suppose it is what it is. When it comes time to give Dustin one of the things he asked for, we get one of my favourite moments of the episode. For the first two episodes, we've seen a lot of edgy Dustin moments where he's rude or distant, whatever, and is lashing out at his friends. Here though, he tries to do the same to Murray, and runs into somebody who will not be putting up with any of that sort of bullshit, and firmly puts him in his place. Murray, of course, is as fun as ever here, but I really liked how Dustin's facial expression slowly morphed from angry to slightly defiant to scolded child over the course of this rant. Just some really good acting, and on top of that, it was very cathartic. It would get old really quickly if he was always snapping at and snarking with everybody with no real resolution or pushback the entire time. However, this newfound humbled persona does not last long, as next up we have a scene where Steve is removing a bunch of stuff from the back of the radio van to try to make it faster so they're able to keep up with the Demogorgon. Dustin of course scoffs at this and calls him stupid because no matter how much weight they remove, the van simply doesn't have what it takes to go that fast. It would need extreme modification to do so. Of course, Steve doesn't vibe with the attitude and he tells Dustin to pipe down. So Dustin picks up the drill and decides the best thing for him to do is to attach the telemetry tracker to Steve's BMW, and thus he climbs on the roof and drills the hole. Oof, brutal. Okay, so this is one of those scenes that I did find kind of annoying because honestly their whole sniping at each other dynamic gets very old. Yes, I realize Dustin's lashing out because he's aware that Eddie died a largely unnecessary death, and he's angry about that. I guess also based on his interactions with Steve in Volume 2, he's trying to distance himself from his friend because of the pain of losing Eddie and not wanting to potentially feel that again. At the same time, Steve's also lashing out at Dustin because he feels forgotten and abandoned, and like he has to compete with the ghost for Dustin's esteem. So in that way, I do get it's important for the arc for the season, but my god, the constant arguing across numerous scenes this season really gets very grating, and not in the way the other characters feel, but in a skip the scene type of way. I just think they went too hard on it. And it doesn't help that Steve's other big dynamic of the season with Jonathan also has been this way, you know? You don't really get much of a break from it. Honestly, for a lot of the dynamics it feels this way. There's so much tension, and despite the episodes going for a long time, it doesn't feel like much of it ever gets resolved into the last minute. How some of it is still ongoing into the big finale, which is it's just lovely, you know? I'm not looking for everybody to be holding hands and singing, but I do think they've overdone the tension with a lot of the dynamics. Thank God for Will and Robin, because their newfound friendship is straight fire in terms of the writing. However, while some of the snark is annoying, I did find the next scene where Nancy pretty much intimidates Murray about putting the telemetry tracker into a shotgun to be pretty funny. Just that sickly sweet tone she puts on with the angry eye contact, and Murray's just there stuttering and trying to avoid looking at her before he has this angry eye twitch, knowing he can't do anything. He wants to lash out at her like he did for Dustin, but here, he's too afraid. It's very funny. Speaking of funny scenes, as they're walking out to go and test the tracker being shot out of a gun, Murray and Jonathan have some goofy dialogue. Murray asks Jonathan why Nancy's being the way that she is, with Jonathan incredulously asking, maybe it has something to do with the fact that her sister's been snatched and her parents were almost killed and are currently in the hospital. Murray being extremely out of touch, he was just so ridiculous and funny, not being able to grasp that somebody would probably not be all that happy and willing to put up with bullshit when they had one of the most extreme family crises imaginable. I also have to say, it seems like he's lost his magic touch. Where once he was able to correctly suggest that there was extreme romantic tension between Nancy and Jonathan, it seems his expertise ends there, because it feels like he was perhaps the mastermind behind getting Jonathan the ring to propose to Nancy, all because Jonathan was telling him that their relationship felt stagnated and somewhat drifting, and that this could fix it somehow. Yikes. I'm not really sure that this really would be the right way for them to fix it all, and based on how things end up during the course of Volume 2, I was right in that assumption, although I do feel a bit salty their relationship ended this way. It feels like the relationship declined alongside the quality of the writing for Jonathan's character. I do think the Duffers really struggled with the number of characters that kept on being added to the show, who needed story arcs of their own to the point that some characters very clearly fell by the wayside. Here we then get yet another funny moment of Nancy putting Murray in his place, which I did very much enjoy. Whenever the big yally characters like Murray or Hopper get slapped down, I just love it. It's just needed sometimes. Speaking of which, now it's over to Hopper and Al in the Upside Down, where they're about to start their interrogation of the soldier that they captured. We have a pretty tense little scene where Hopper talks to the dude about how he's a piece of shit and that Hopper's more than willing to kill him in order to protect Al. He also tells him that he might as well tell him everything he knows, because the reality is, he's gonna find out anyway, because Al can root around in people's minds to find the truth. I also like that they well and truly stripped away any sort of likability from the military in this scene. Just made them outright villains, which let you not care when they get destroyed. This guy's going all bleeding heart about his friends in the desert that Eleven killed to protect herself when she was escaping from the bunker, even though the very same soldiers had attacked her and butchered the unarmed scientists, then had also attacked and tried to kill Mike, Will, and Jonathan at the buyer's house in California, and are obviously perfectly willing to keep on killing whilst trying to chase down and experiment on a 16-year-old girl. But sure, Al's the villain, right? In that way, I like that they removed any sense of goodness and any sense of nuance. They don't have them just be misguided. They're actively evil in this show, especially when you come to the truth of what they've been doing at the lab in the Upside Down in Volume 2. In an era where there's so much grey morality, it is refreshing to have villains who are just outright pieces of shit. We see Al infiltrate his mind and see the inside of the base, and she follows Dr. K down a corridor where she comes to a big door. Despite the soldier pleading that he doesn't know what's back there and that she needs to get out of his head, she tries to force it, only to discover that she can't see anything because it seems he really doesn't know, but she can hear her kryptonite, which suggests that they have somebody powerful locked up there. Somebody like Vecna. I will admit, when this episode first came out, I fully bought into this theory by Al. I just thought it was so cool that maybe he was possibly locked up there, but is still so powerful that he's pulling the strings and both planning his escape, but also something with Holly and the rest of the kids. I figured Al and Hopper would go to try to kill him, but accidentally release him, and he'd wreck the military and start off with his other plans. And obviously, that's not what happened, but I still think this was a really cool concept they set up, and the ending sequence and reveal was really cool too. We then come to Holly back in the dream world, where she's talking to herself, trying to psych herself up to go into the woods to help Henry. Whilst initially she's unwilling to do so because she's scared, a quick look at Holly the heroic inspires her to go out, and so she grabs a fire poker and dons a cloak, looking just like the little character Mike gave her, which I think is really, really cute. She then heads off into the woods, and at this point I was very much wondering what the hell was going to happen here. I had no idea that Max was going to get involved in that storyline, so I wondered who the hell she was even going to find out there. Once again, I honestly think this is probably one of the best mysteries of the season that we've had. I really just had no clue as to how it was going to play out. Then it's off to the Turnbow house at last, where we get a glimpse of the Turnbow household and the personalities of Derek and his sister Tina. Oh, and their mum. Probably one of my favourite lines of the episode came when she told Tina to answer the door, and then told her to be nice to whoever it was, unless it's a Mormon, and after some hesitation, she adds, or a Democrat. After a bit of chatter in the van outside from the rest of the party, we cut to dinner where the majority of the family have gone ham on that pie, and Eric is pretending to eat a slice. However, there's one problem. Tina hasn't eaten it. Honestly, this whole scene is peak comedy. The dad starting to slur his words and walking off and collapsing. The mum chasing after him to try to wake him up, only to collapse too. Derek cackling the entire time before suddenly passing out. Tina and Erica arguing about how Erica's trying to make her fat with the pie because she's jealous of Tina and a boy named Josh, with the further revelation that the reason they fell out in the first place is because Erica got the kid out in dodgeball, hitting him so hard that he cried in front of the entire class. So now he won't speak to Tina because he associates the two of them together. Then when Tina goes to scream and cry about what's going on, Erica tells her she should have eaten the damn pie and approaches her with a syringe like a serial killer. Holy shit. This scene was just hilarious, and once again, it brings much needed levity to a story just before we come to a way more intense action sequence. So the Turnbos are dragged out with hoods over their heads, and Will, Joyce, and Robin all go to the farm to look after them. Meanwhile, the rest of the party go full Home Alone and start to turn the Turnbow mansion into a house of horrors to ensnare a Demogorgon and keep themselves alive long enough to do so. They take their places, and I have to say, I'd be pretty thrilled to be part of the car team or the farm team here. Demogorgons so far have been shown to be pretty much invincible and vicious, so being stuck inside a house with one that's actively hunting, it feels like a good way to get killed. No chance my ass is going in there. Before we get to the action, we get a sweet little scene with Will and Joyce where they complete their reconciliation and agree they both have to trust in each other to succeed. Honestly, I just love this scene. In the previous episodes, I found Joyce's overbearing nature to be extremely annoying, but the payoff to it all has been really satisfying. It's just nice to see a really wholesome, unproblematic, and non-toxic parental relationship. Although that being said, let's just ignore that she hasn't really felt like a parent to Jonathan in quite a long time. You'd be forgiven for thinking he's some random cousin that stays with them on and off rather than her actual son. Now though, it's showtime. We come to an action sequence which is just really intense and exciting. The Demogorgon attacks the Turnbow house in pursuit of Derek and instead finds the party, and it's on. This dude gets absolutely Kevin McAllistered. First by Lucas with acid water balloons, he gets spiked by a tripwire trap and chases him downstairs, and holy shit, I gotta say, Lucas is brave. He's legitimately upstairs alone with that thing and it almost gets him, and he has to jump across the rug trap, otherwise it's all over. Lucas is such a Chad. The beast chases him and falls, but is fast enough to grab the ledge, and so Mike smacks it on the head with a shovel, and it falls into a barbed wire trap, and then it's shot by Nancy with the tracker before Jonathan sets it on fire, which seems to be the first thing that really hurts it properly. Do they have super healing or something, or are they just really, really strong? Maybe both. It's like fighting an evil Wolverine, if Wolverine had a creepy plant face and was also tall. He then jumps up to escape the fire, and poor old Mike has to smack it a couple times. Lucky he was on fire and trying to escape, because otherwise, good night Michael. It goes into the Upside Down, which leaves Steve and Dustin the job of tracking it, whilst Nancy and Jonathan hop in the car to come with them. They chase it a little bit and then are forced to turn around and change directions, with it being revealed at the farm that it's coming for them now. It knows where they are. But how? I'm guessing Vecna still has a limited ability to look into Will's eyes and memories? I get that he can look into Derek too, but Derek doesn't know where they are. Only Will knows the location. We then finish off the episode with Holly's adventure, and it's not a very long scene, but it was pretty epic on that first watch, especially when you realize it's a person chasing Holly, not a monster. I will admit though, I did not get it was Max until legitimately the very last second. The reveal was epic and so well handled. Hell yeah! I did like that they don't just keep her in the coma doing nothing until she revives. Honestly, this and then the next episode are probably the season's peak for me so far, and so I'm pretty keen to talk about that one next. Until then though, with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.